photographers, we are here today in Photoshop for our very first lesson, trying to establish how to run edits on Photoshop. So we're going to start with the basics today. So let's go ahead and get started by opening up Photoshop. We're going to go to File, Open. We're going to navigate to the Courses folder. So let's first of all look at this section over here. So you need to make sure that you are under this PC. So when you open up, you're probably going to see something like this. It may not look like this here, but you should have these general folders. So you should have, say, something that says this PC or my computer. If you expand on that, you should see these drives, which are what you see here. Now you guys will only have two. You will have one that has your name on it, and then you will have one that's called Courses. Okay, your name is obviously where we have been saving our photos for this class, but we're going to access a photo that I've saved for you. So you're going to click on Courses, you're going to double click, then you're going to go up to Art and double click, then you're going to find the photo class and double click. Now there's 4 files in here. We're going to start with the first one, which is Retouch 1, and click Open. Now because this is my file, it's not going to let you save back to this folder. So you need to save a copy of this in what's called the cloud. So we're going to go to File, Save As. You want to make sure you click on Save to Creative Cloud. We're going to call this Retouch 1, and then with your name. So put your name in there, whether you're first or last, it doesn't matter. My first, and I'm going to click Save. Okay, so now that's in the Creative Cloud. All right, so we're ready to start. So as I said, this is the basics of photo editing. So I'm going to teach you how to crop, rotate, and straighten. We're going to talk about adjustment layers that include something called tone. We're going to talk about color contrast, color cast, contrast, vibrance, and then finally finishing filters today. So let's get started with the first thing you do, which is always to crop. Okay, using our crop tool. So the crop tool is located right here. So right now my toolbar is in single column. If I want to go back to double column, I just click on this here and I locate that crop tool. So you're going to see there are some presets set up here. Okay, the first thing I want to show you is where you can change this from standard ratio. You can give it a preset size. So let's say you know you're going to crop this photo. You want it to be an 8x10 because that's the size frame you're going to put it in, or a 5x6, or 5x7 or 4x6. Those are your most common aspect ratios for printed photos. You don't have to change it to that. You can just leave it as unconstrained, which means it's going to be a random size. The benefits of this means that you can crop it exactly how you want it to look. But the problem may be is if you try to print and frame this, you may not be able to find a frame. You'd have to get a custom frame, right? So having said that, we're going to leave it on a free crop. And we're going to go ahead and drag it in the bottom right-hand corner just a little bit. So you'll notice that as I drag, because it's unconstrained right now, I can change the format. So if I wanted to, I could go long and small. I could go thick and thin, so you can rotate this however, or you can crop this however you want. But we're going to crop out just that bottom little edge. So you see how that goes gray there? That means it would crop that out. But before I click OK, I'm going to show you something. Now, when you crop, you also want to pay attention to what's called your horizon line. Okay? Because right now this photo is somewhat tilted. I can tell because the horizon line is, if you're outside, it's obviously where the sky meets the land. But if you're inside, it's where your ground or your floor meets the wall or the background, which is right here. And as you can see, it's kind of angled down just slightly. So I need to rotate this thing. In order to rotate, you let your cursor hover outside of this crop box. You should get a double-headed arrow. And then if you click and drag, you can rotate. And you want to try to rotate so that horizon line, which in this case I'm looking at the bottom edge of this cabinet, is horizontal. You can move your crop in and out a little bit more if you want to crop a little more or less. That's totally up to you. And when you are happy with it, you either hit the Enter key on your keyboard, or you can click up here to the right, which is the check mark. If you don't like this, you want to start over again, you would hit the No button. All right, but we're going to say we like it. We're going to click OK. So now we have cropped this. So this cropping is a great way that you can reframe. So if I wanted to switch my center of interest, which I'm going to show this to you, you don't have to do it. But let's say right now this is my center of interest, but I want it to be slightly off-centered. That's where if I use that crop, I can move it, and notice you get that rule of thirds. I can move my photo around so that I make sure that fits right in that rule of thirds. Okay, so if you want to, you can try that as well. All right, let's go ahead and continue. I do want to show you how to fix your tone, color, contrast, and vibrancy using adjustments. So adjustments are the changes that you make to the color and light of a photo, okay? So the first one you always fix is your tone. That's the darks and lights. And we're going to do that using what's called an adjustment layer. In order to do that, we have to open up what's called the layers panel. So by default, you should have a tab over here that says layers, but if not, you can also find it by going to Window, Layers. So we're going to open this up. Notice right now, we have one layer called background layer. Okay. So what an adjustment layer is it's going to make changes to the tone, the color, but it's going to do it on its own layer. So in other words, it's not going to make changes specifically to this. So I want you to watch this. Don't follow along, just watch so I can show you. So I'm going to show you how to fix the tone straight on that layer. So your tone is the lights and darks. So if I were to do this and I would change my tone and click OK. Notice it's changed it now here, but the problem is it's now embedded on that layer. So if I were to close this, bring it back up, those changes are saved in. So if I decide tomorrow this is too dark, it's done. It's a done deal. I'm going to undo those changes. I'm hitting Control Z on my keyboard. That's the keyboard shortcut. Or I can always go up to Edit, Undo. Okay, that will undo those. So I'm going to show you now instead the better way to do it. Instead of doing it directly on the layer, we're going to add what's called an adjustment layer. So if you see down here, it looks like a little kind of like a Pepsi Cola sign or yin yang symbol where it says Create New Fill or Adjustment Layer. If I click on that, you're going to get a drop down. These are all of the image adjustment commands that are up here up top, but they're going to put them on their own layer. So we're going to go to levels. So the brightness, contrast, levels, curves, and exposure, all of these deal with tone. We're almost always going to use the levels option. So when you do, it's going to open up that same histogram that you just saw me using. And we don't pay attention to this one down here. We pay attention to the mountain ranges. It's called a histogram. And this arrow here represents the black. So if I pull it in, it's going to make my darks darker. This to the right is the white. It's going to make the lights lighter. And the one in the middle is your darks. Or sorry, your midtones. That means like the grays, the middle values. So you can move it to where you feel looks best. So typically speaking, what you want to do is you want to move your blacks to the start of your mountain peak. You want to move your whites to the start of the mountain peak, and you want your grays directly in the center. And when you're happy with that, you can just simply close that. So now I can see what it looks like before and after by clicking on this little eye icon. So this is the adjustments we just made. If I turn that off, that's what it looked like before. That's what it looked like after. So stop the video and apply a levels adjustment layer now. Okay, so I want to show you a couple other things. I'm going to turn off that levels. And again, you can do this if you want to, or you can just watch. You can either follow along or just watch. I can try that a different way. So if I'm not crazy about the levels option to fix the tone, I can go up to brightness and contrast or exposure. Either one is an option for you. I just like levels because for me it gives me a lot of control without having to understand exposure. Because remember, exposure is a lighting term, it's a photography term talking about the amount of light that the camera lets in. But so you can do the same way, so you can deal with this. But for me, it's the personal choice. I like using levels instead. So if we added an extra one on there, you can delete it by dragging it down. I don't want that, and I'm going to turn my levels one back on. Okay, so that's your tone. That's the amounts of darks and lights. The next step is your color cast. So color cast is when, because of some weird lighting, it artificially changes the color. And the easiest way to identify it is to look at an area that should be white and to see if there's a slight color cast. So for me, it's hard to tell here, but this is a white blanket, and it should be a little, to me it's a little yellow here because of some lighting. So we're going to balance that color cast out. I'm going to zoom back out here. Oops. Okay, zooming back out. I'm going to click on that adjustment layer again, but this time I'm going to go to color balance. What your color balance does is it either increases or decreases the different colors that you have. So you see you have cyan, which is a blue, red, magenta, green, yellow, and blue. So if I think it's a little too yellow, you want to move away from the yellow. So you drag your slider. If I drag it too much, notice it goes too blue. I'm trying to get rid of just a little bit of that. I can also balance my other tones if I feel like maybe the green needs to go up or the blue needs to go down. And again, I'm going to hit that before and after. Now you'll notice, yeah, that really was more yellow than it maybe should have been. Okay, so that's your color balancing. All right, so stop the video and do that now. All right, I'm going to show you a couple of other adjustment layer options. So we're going to go back to that same little button at the bottom. This time I want to show you, let's go to vibrance. So vibrance has to do with the saturation of colors, and it has to do with the purity of detail. So the vibrance is the detail, the crispness of your lines. So if I go all the way to the right, it's going to start to make things look kind of sort of fake. We want to crisp it up just a little bit. Saturation is the brightness of the color. So this just is going to tweak it just a little bit. And again, I can see before or after. It just makes it a little bit punchier. Again, we're trying to make these look better. We're not trying to make them look fake. So you have to look really close. So probably looking at the orange here is the easiest place to see, or maybe the palm tree in the back, how it's just making the colors just a little bit brighter, the edges a little bit crisper, so it just makes the overall image clarity a little bit nicer, okay? Okay, so here's the nice thing. If I were to close this, come up tomorrow and decide, I don't like that vibrance, this is where I can change it. I can come in and I can double click, oops, sorry. Double click and it's going to reopen that up again. So if I double click on that the little Pepsi Cola, I'm going to call it the Pepsi Cola logo, it'll pop open the option so I can edit it. I can go back and say, no, maybe I did make it a little too much or too less. So all you have to do, so again, if I want to change the color balance, I can double click on that, it's going to reopen that. I can change that if I want to. So these adjustment layers are what's called non-destructive. That means it doesn't actually edit the actual image itself. I can always undo it later. If I weren't to do them on adjustment layers, it would be a damaging effect to the photo because you're irreversibly changing the image. Where this way we're doing it, it protects the quality of the image. All right, so once we've decided we are all done with everything, we think this is perfect. We don't want to do anything else to it. We are happy with everything. What we need to do is we do need to sharpen. We have to finish our finishing filters, okay? So we fixed our tone, which is level. We fixed our color cast, which is the color balance. And we fixed vibrance, which is the sharpness and the saturation of those colors. We're going to apply all of these to this. So in order to apply it, permanently change it, we're going to go up to Layer. You may have to scroll down. You want to go to Flatten Image. Notice it now has applied those adjustment layers permanently to that layer. Now if I wanted to undo this, I'm like, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. All you would have to do is go up to Edit Undo, and it would undo that flattening, or Control C. But we're going to say, okay, we're still happy with it. Now we need to finish this. There's 3 different finishing filters that you may use as a photographer. One is called Sharp. It's a sharpening mask, which again, it just crisps up those details. So maybe in that vibrance adjustment layer didn't quite do enough of it. Maybe you have a little bit more blur than that could handle. You have what's called surface blur, and you have reduce noise. I'm going to show you today the unsharp mask filter, which is crisping up. So this is if your image is slightly blurry, and I do mean slightly, but slightly blurry, that you want to crisp it up. So you're going to go up to Filter, Sharpen, and you're actually going to go to something called an unsharp mask. It's going to open up this dialog box here. You want to make sure Preview Checks is going to show you as you do it in here. Again, like before, if you take it all the way to the right, it's going to look really fake and really artificial. We don't want that. And I always deal with the amount. I don't mess around too much with the radius and the threshold. However, you can. Photographers do this all by eye. There's no recipe. It's all just what you find visually appealing. But you want to use that, you just crisp up your edges just a little bit. It sharpens the edges so that your details pop, your darks are a little bit darker, and you get that little bit of contrast in there. So I've taken my amount. I'm just going to take it to like 10. You can even type it in and click OK. So that's your unsharp mask filter. I'm going to show you reduce noise and surface blur in later lessons. Okay, so just as a review, here's what we have covered today. We've covered how to crop, rotate, and straighten. We've talked about adjustment layers that relate to your tone, which is your lights and darks, color balance, which is fixing color corrections, and your vibrance, which is your detail and your color saturation. And then we finished with the unsharp mask filter. Now those three things, crop, adjustment layers, and finishing filter, that's going to fix 95% of any editing you're ever going to need to do. And if you are editing for photojournalism standards, you can do those things. You can crop, you can fix tone and color, and you can sharpen. That's about all you can do ethically, because to do anything else is to fake it, right? And we want to make sure that we are staying ethical to our photojournalistic standards. All right? Good job, photographers. Before we are done, we need to make sure we share this with me, and we mark it as done in Google Classroom. So to share, you click on the blue button up here at the top. You are going to type in shore, and this is what should come up. If you click on that, and then you hit share, it should send it to me. And then you need to go ahead and close down Photoshop or minimize it, go to Google Classroom, and where this assignment is posted, click mark as done. So I know to open up my Photoshop and search for that shared file. If you have any questions, by all means, make sure you ask. Good job.